There actually is a very specific form of self-sabotage where people are afraid of success. Like they actually have a deep-seated fear of success. And so even when they see progress and consistency at a certain point, repeatedly, they'll blow it up. So to me, when I'm talking about self-sabotage, that's very specifically what I'm thinking is that type of, where you're actually ruining your own progress. I think the knowing what to do and not doing it is, at least in the way that my mind works, it's a mixture of different factors, how you deal with pressure, your biases, your subconscious patterns, all of that. It all kind of comes together and produces the outcome of not following your rules.
Hey, welcome back. Here at the Market Mamas podcast, I cover a wide range of topics from the intricacies of day trading to mindset mastery and psychological growth, with the goal of the conversations being next level growth for all of us. My name is Becky, and I'm a US-based futures day trader from the Pacific Northwest. My trading experience includes trading stocks, options, crypto, and futures, with both trading a personal account as well as with prop funding companies. Over time, I found that I most enjoy the fast-paced world of intraday futures trading, so that is my primary day trading focus now. Thank you for joining me on the Market Mamas podcast today.
There's a moment every trader hits where you realize it's not your strategy that's a problem, it's you. That's exactly why I have been so excited for today's conversation. So welcome back to Market Mamas. I'm your host, Becky, and today I get to sit down with someone who I personally seriously look up to in the trading psychology space, has been an inspiration to me for years and really supportive along my journey. So I feel very honored to have you join me today. It's Créde Sheehy-Kelly, a performance coach who has helped countless traders understand the deeper patterns behind their decisions, but more importantly, how to change them and level up. So Créde, it is such an honor to have you with me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Thanks so much for having me, Becky. And that was a lovely introduction, so I appreciate it. But I'm really excited for our conversation and, happy to be here.
Awesome. And you come from Ireland. I love your accent.
It's so funny. I get that a lot. To me, I don't have an accent, but of course I do.
I know, right? It's beautiful. Okay, well, I'd actually love to just kind of get into it and start here because I think that I want to start asking questions that might really help traders from all areas of experience so far. So from everything that you've seen working with traders thus far in your career, what do most people think is holding them back versus what's actually holding them back?
Oh, great question. So I think it depends on the stage that they're at. I'm actually mapping this out as a framework at the moment. So this will be clearer in a few weeks. I'll release something on it. But it's really about the stage that the trader's at. So I think early in trading, even when people are paying attention to psychology, it's actually just really getting the technical skills dialed in and getting a rule-based system. That's the priority. So it's nearly I'm not going to go as far as to say a waste of time to be working on psychology then, but it's really the biggest gains you're going to get come from actually just really refining the system. But then once that's dialed in and it's rule-based and all of that, I think that the biggest issue with psychology is that people think that when they're working on it, they're doing the right things. And that's not always the case. So someone can be really, motivated, can be looking at all the YouTube videos and think that they are doing the right things to improve their psychology. And actually what they're doing is not necessarily effective. So I feel that there's a big gap in trading psychology to explain that, it's actually a bit easier than it may seem once you know exactly what you should be doing.
Right. That makes so much sense. I mean, I think there's so many layers to it all, and it's easier to just try and pick kind of the superficial things and think that will be enough. But I think that the longer you been in trading, you probably have learned that the superficial things are not actually really the answer.
Yeah, well, definitely, depending on where your goals are at. If you're, coming into trading to make a career type money out of it, then it really does require, it's like a high performance sport. It requires that level of detail on every aspect, on the technical side and on the psychology side. So, if someone's treating it as a hobby, then the surface level stuff will definitely help. It's not that it's wrong. But if you're trying to take it to that level where you really want to make, replace an income or make serious money from it, it's kind of, it has to happen sooner or later. And the sooner it happens, the more money you're going to save yourself, in giving it back to the market, really.
Yeah, to really take it seriously and treat it as a business. That's a very good delineation. How long have you been digging into the trader psychology world?
Yeah, so since 2019, and it's random. So, well, not random, but I started off life as a sports psychologist. So that's my original qualification is in sports psychology. And the science of sports psychology is the same as the science of performance psychology. It's all the kind of, it's all the constant science. And then I worked with business people and high performers in lots of different areas. And in 2019, a trader approached me and I was able to take him on. And it was new to me. I hadn't no background in trading, no background in finance. And we worked together and I loved it. And it just grew from there. So since 2019, I've been pretty much exclusively working with traders.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it helps ground me in what I'm doing to consider trading a performance athletic sport, kind of, because you have to approach it with that sort of professionalism and attention and preparation and focus. Because that's when I trade my best, is when I'm very serious about, like, it's game time, when it's my trading session, and to bring my best game and follow the rules and execute per strategy. Like that the parallels are very significant.
Absolutely. And I think that is a useful way of explaining it, because then people get the idea of that, like, pre-market preparation. It's not just looking at the market, checking what happened overnight. It's actually getting yourself in the right mental and emotional space to perform at your peak. And with the reviews, it's not just kind of doing a random review or doing an hour-long trading review and tracking all the data. It actually has to be meaningful data that you're going to use then to improve. So I've worked in, high performance sports environments before I was working in trading, and a lot of those processes are similar. Like, they carry across to trading, and I think they really benefit traders because it gives structure to this quite nebulous thing or quite abstract idea of trading psychology. It actually makes it very concrete, and people already have a mental model for high performance sports. So it kind of makes it easier to bring it into trading.
Yeah, I love that. It brings it to your mind so much easier. So, question then, about the emotions when they start to play in. So, when a trader is in a live trade, how about when the emotions start to spike? You put your leverage on the line, your capital's on the line, you start to get nervous. There's fear and hesitation or overconfidence. What is a practical in the moment tool that they can use to regain that control if it starts to slip once the leverage is in play?
I'm trying to break it down into simple here. So my first answer, just to answer exactly what you're asking, I would say that something like breathing exercises, this is going to sound too surface level as I explain it, but I'll explain the second bit to it. But something like breathing exercises, or progressive muscle relaxation, which is just a very simple technique of tensing the muscles and using breath to release tension from the muscles and, to kind of calm your mind. Something like that is really effective because it actually pulls down the level of pressure that you're under. And so when you're in a live trade, it's the pressure that kind of triggers all of the other psychological mechanisms that will trip you up. So if you can at least pull down the pressure, you're less likely to succumb to the emotional, going off the rails with the emotions. It's not, like I say, it's a surface level fix. My other answer to that would be the work that you do outside, away from the live market on your psychology is the work that will change that for you in the moment. So yes, you can use these in the moment techniques, but without actually kind of digging deeper into what's triggering the emotions and all that back work, it's like a band-aid. So there's no one solution that will magically fix it, in the live market. It's kind of all of the work that you do outside of it that will stop that emotion from arising in the first place.
Right. That makes so much sense that it's twofold. In the moment, you need to calm down your nervous system and take some deep breaths and focus on your body and get out of the nerves. But then the back end work of just making your system stronger and everything, your approach more steady, will make it less of an in the moment issue, kind of.
Exactly. And so one of the big pieces of the work that I do with people is around the subconscious mind. So really what's happening when your emotions are charged, whatever way, if it's rage, anger, fear, whatever way it's being triggered, it's usually linked with patterns in your subconscious that are there, nothing to do with trading, that are coming from childhood, So if you can do the work to get to the root of the beliefs that are triggering the emotions and rewire those, so that's why the affirmations are so impactful. The emotional charge isn't as strong. So you actually don't have something to try and fix in the moment. You've already sort of preempted it and neutralized it before it happens. So for me, that's the most effective thing you can do, is really do that deeper work. Not everyone is interested in doing it or kind of is ready for it necessarily, but it's one of the most effective things you can do.
Yeah, I experienced that too. When I had tried everything in my trading and I kept having the same psychological hurdles, I hit a wall of you just have to go deeper. There's something more internal that's on the back end of all of this. And when I started to target that and, get a little bit of assistance with that, that was the hugest game changer. And that's when I finally started actually getting profits more than just one hit wonders.
Exactly. That's what I consistently see. It's when people go to that level of depth and they really tackle those things. And it's not as, sometimes people might think that's therapy or it's kind of a big scary thing to do, to go delving that deep into your psyche. But it's actually not. There's some very typical beliefs that most people have that trigger the same type of emotions. It's actually not that uncommon, I would say. Like, so it can be an easier process than it may seem at the start.
Yeah. I love that you broke it down like that, because that has been my experience as well. And I don't know if this kind of parallels my next thought on this is like, what do you see about identity shifts? Because I think that is a big part of going from inconsistent to consistently profitable trader. Is I think most of us, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to do an identity shift to get into that consistent successfulness. Do you think that that's true?
You've nailed it. Like that, literally all of the work that I do, like everything, all the mental conditioning is about creating that identity shift. So, and even the research really speaks to this. So it's stronger, even with affirmations, like it's stronger to use affirmations that reinforce the identity that you want to become. So not the gap, but the actual, like, I am this person, rather than trying to close the gap. So you can use all sorts of mental conditioning tools like visualization, affirmations, goal setting, whatever, to embody the identity of who you're trying to be. And that's, according to the research, a much stronger way to change your behavior and for that change to hold, like to sustain that over time, rather than constantly looking at, I'm here and I want to be there. It's like using tools to create the mindset that I have already arrived.
Oh, I love that, because it's true. If you can see yourself as, I am consistent, I do follow my rules, my capital grows over time, then you can like dial it back and into specific habits that you have to do each day, because a person who has those outcomes has to specifically this day in the moment not move their stop loss and honor their targets and honor their trading time. And so kind of like backing that into like in the moment activities kind of like pulls it together, I think.
Exactly. And it works on both levels again. So that's a very practical kind of, you can actually think out, okay, if I was this person, what actions would I be taking? And that's all conscious. But it also works at the subconscious level, where when you're reinforcing that you are that person with affirmations or other kind of tools that work in your subconscious, naturally you start to gravitate towards the behaviors or the decisions or the thought processes that that person would have. So it's kind of like you're doing it consciously and you're doing it subconsciously. And that's like the most powerful pairing.
Oh, nice. I love that. Okay, so since I have you, I'm going to ask you some questions about like things that I have worked through. But I'm wondering about this cycle that I think a lot of us traders go through, especially in like the messy middle of like finding some success but not holding it. Do you think, like, how would you approach a cycle of like being all in and really consistent and like nailing your process, and then stumbling and tilting and burning out? Like how can we bridge that and get to that sustainable consistency with, I don't know, to make it more consistent that you don't have the roller coaster, I guess?
So that's a great question. And so I would say the first part of that is really mapping out, like developing much greater self-awareness as to what's going on. So one would be mapping out all of the things that you were doing that were helping. So there's different layers to it, but one of the things that happens when someone is like, has gotten a level of consistency and held it for even say a few months or a few weeks or a few months. So it's not just by chance. It means that they are doing some things that are really helping them. And they might not necessarily have like mapped that out as a plan and thought about it all. But if you start going off track, it's normally you'll see that somebody started slacking off on something they were doing that was helping, or they start doing it sporadically and not as consistently. So, and then that shows up as inconsistency in their trading. So it's like a real simple exercise that you can do yourself without a coach, without anyone, is to think back on the time when you were consistent. Like, what time were you waking up in the morning? How were you preparing? How much sleep were you getting? What was going on in your personal life? What, were things calm? And then suddenly you hit a point where something happened in your personal life and that derailed you. Or so you're trying to like map the picture of what was happening when it was going well, and then what was the trigger point where it started to go off track, and what am I doing now? And once you've got all that kind of information, you can start then, narrowing down exactly where to focus. So one of the things that I really advocate that people do is not try and work on everything at once, but sort of figure out what one thing is going to make the biggest difference. So if you did a process like that, you might find that actually it was sleep. And I'm laughing at this because I'm completely sleep deprived at the moment because my 1-year-old daughter is like not sleeping. And it impacts my performance like it does, I'm human. So it could be that you pinpoint something in your life where you're like, sleep was disrupted consistently. And it could be as straightforward as, or, that might be the first thing to work on, is to go and actually do a sleep routine and like fix that. And then you might see a slight uplift. Then you get a bit of confidence because you're starting to see yourself coming back, back on track, and then it snowballs. So I would say the self-awareness piece is really key before you go in and try and fix anything. It's to get awareness of what was working and what was the trigger and then what's not working.
Yeah. That's such a practical thing, because I think we all know, like, we can all clearly go to a place in our mind of like when you were really successful and locked in, and then when you're not feeling it, that's when I guess you would probably more likely do the deep dive and lean into what works and try and cut out the worst, I guess, sabotaging things. Because do you find that self-sabotage is like a real thing in traders? Because I feel like it is. I feel like a lot of futures traders, we know what to do, or any kind of trader, we know what to do, but there's a moment where it's like we don't always follow our rules, and that gets you into so much trouble. So like, how do traders best manage like that self-sabotage?
So in a nutshell, that's like exactly what I do. So because I'm not a trader, so I'm not coaching anything on the technical side of trading. So literally in a nutshell, I help people to do what they know they should be doing. So every single trader that I work with has that same problem of they know what they should be doing and they're not doing it. The reason can be, lots of different reasons why that's happening. But just the self-sabotage is interesting because there actually is a very specific form of self-sabotage where people are afraid of success. Like they actually have a deep-seated fear of success. And so even when they see progress and consistency at a certain point, repeatedly, they'll blow it up. So to me, when I'm talking about self-sabotage, that's very specifically what I'm thinking is that type of, where you're actually ruining your own progress. I think the knowing what to do and not doing it is, at least in the way that my mind works, it's a mixture of different factors, like, how you deal with pressure, your biases, your subconscious patterns, all of that. It all kind of comes together and produces the outcome of not following your rules. So there's no one simple answer to that. But I do see people who have reached a level of consistency and repeatedly get to the same amount in their trading account or their bank account. And then once they reach that ceiling, like a thermostat, they blow it up. And I think that that's a big serious issue that a lot of traders deal with.
I think I really underestimated that in my trading, because I didn't come from any like Wall Street or finance background or any sort of like upbringing or pedigree or whatever that would have me naturally fit this role. And so I didn't understand that for a long time. And then I started hearing it in different like circles and from different mentors. And it was like, once you really start to think about it, it's like, gosh, that could really be a very real thing. And I think that that's such an excellent thing that you tackle for people, because I don't think that most of us don't realize it until you actually really dig into it. And it's actually a big part of a lot of it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when I work with people or I see people work on that issue, it often unlocks things in other areas of their life, because if someone's struggling with that, it's a pattern that it expands, much further than trading in their lives, and usually comes from something in their childhood or whatever. So when they work on it in the trading context, it actually improves things in other areas of their life. And that's true for a lot of these different things, the different issues that you'd work on from a trading psychology perspective. But that one particularly, it's, a lot around self-worth, or, maybe the limits that your culture has placed on you or that you have ascribed to in your culture, things like that. So it's a really important one to actually even just question yourself around. So it's not everybody has that as an issue, but it's, in my self-paced program, that's one of the sections is like, check if you have a fear of success or not. If you don't, great. If you do, you're going to know about it. It's very much a yes, I do, or no, I don't. There's no like, maybe I do. So I think it's a question that every trader should ask themselves when they've gotten to a certain point, if they see any level of repeated pattern of success and then going backwards. It's useful exercise.
Okay, so these are really, really good tips. I'm so glad that you came on today and are sharing this wisdom with us. So a question I'm thinking of is, how can traders, when they're starting to work through it and getting that profitability, how can they really grow and foster that genuine trust in their strategy and themselves? And because I think that is a big part of like holding to your faith and who you're becoming. But that genuine trust, I think, is hard.
So there are actually very specific techniques you can use around that, and I'll talk about them. But one thing that I've seen as well is that sometimes traders will say, I lose faith in my strategy, or I start to doubt my strategy. And sometimes there is actually more work to be done on refining the rules. So sometimes when people come through my program and they're doing the psychology work, they're better able to tease out what's a technical problem. When I say technical, I mean like strategy, or, I'm just kind of dividing them into technical and psychology. So sometimes it will make it clearer what's a psychology issue and what's an issue related to rules. So sometimes people start the psychology work and then they're like, oh, actually, I can see. So for example, if they're taking A+ setups, so someone's working on the issue of like jumping into low quality trades. And so they start tracking their performance goal of how many of the trades that I took were A+ setups. And because they're now getting to that level of granularity in their tracking of their data, it suddenly becomes clear to them that, oh, I haven't actually fully articulated, or like I haven't written down exactly what are the criteria of an A+ setup. So sometimes, you'll do some work in the psychology, you'll see a need. That means actually I should do some work here on the technical side and all of that. So I think that's just worth, for someone who's saying that they find they doubt their strategy under pressure or something, it's always good to rule out, have you actually refined your strategy and your rules to the level that, and back tested them to the level that if you were a robot and you executed it, it would be profitable. So that's the first thing to rule out. But then after that, to kind of build that belief, one of the most useful things you can do is visualization. And like there's, decades of research behind this. It sounds, well, to some people, it might sound like a bit of a woo-woo concept, but it's, like used by high performance athletes all the time. And I use it with traders all the time. And specifically, you can create a life vision script. So you kind of imagine yourself at the end point of this, where you've reached the financial goals. If it is that you're a trader who was, I don't know, you have a job and you're trying to trade full time and you're trying to make that transition, in the script, you would have made it. So you're a full-time trader. It's providing your full salary for your family, whatever. And you really build out that vision, and then you practice that. So it's, you're training your mind, and you literally practice it as an imagery session 3 or 4 times a week. And that is actually something that builds the belief and builds your confidence. And it's even, from the research, it makes you more likely to persevere in the face of challenging goals. So there's actually a lot of like small, simple things that you can do that help you to build that belief.
Just a quick pause before we get into this. Trading can be intense, and staying mindful during your session matters so much. That's why I created and am sharing a free 3-part audio experience that's helped me deeply. 1 for starting your day with calm intention, 1 to stay centered while you trade, and 1 to wind down with grace when it's time to stop. These tracks are yours. Just click the link in the description.
Yeah. Plus, I have developed a visualization practice that I need to be more consistent with. But for anyone who hasn't tried it, like, try it, because I find it so like grounding and peaceful to like bring that version of me like into like full focus in my mind. And then it's like, oh my gosh, like I want to get there. Like I really want to honor the things that I'm doing now, because that is such a beautiful view of who I could be if I really like lock in now. And I absolutely love that practice.
And it sounds like, you're doing it so effectively that the emotions are being evoked for you. Like that's the key. So sometimes someone will say visualization isn't working for me, assuming there's someone who can hold mental images in their mind. But it's actually because the script is too abstract, or it's kind of, the script itself is not evoking the emotions, but it's the emotions are the thing that creates the impact. So you want as evocative a script as possible, that, with mental images, like auditory images, you might describe how you lift the coffee cup off the table and, the smell of the coffee as you're drinking it, looking at the market. So you make it like as vivid as possible. And that's what makes it a really effective script, because you're able to actually immerse yourself in it as if it's real. And, your brain treats mental images the same as if you're seeing it in real life. So it activates the same neural pathways. So you're literally training your brain to experience it before you've experienced it in real life. So it's super powerful. But just one other point on that, like a very concrete tip for people, is also the more that you can build experiences of mastery, the more likely you are to persist and to grow in confidence. So if a trader is kind of, has this goal of making X amount of money, whatever, but they're only tracking progress by the P&L, that's not granular enough measure of success to keep you motivated. Because even if you're doing all of the work on all of the psychology stuff, it can take a while for it to impact the P&L. So if you're tracking things like, did I do my visualization practice today? Like, tick, that's a process goal that I've achieved. Did I, like, maybe 75% of the trades I took today met my A+ setup criteria? Those small wins tracked consistently over time will keep you motivated.
Yeah. I love that. And I feel like the more I get into like trader psychology and my own journey as well, I feel like very much that P&L is a lagging indicator of your growth as a trader, because that doesn't come right away. You can't do strong visualization for 2 weeks straight and then the profits just come exponentially. Like you have to start tackling all kinds of parts of it, like the mental game and strategy, like fine tuning your strategy. And then the P&L comes, weeks to months later, even the next year. But the work that you're doing, it starts to slowly change, right? Because all the work that we do, none of it's a quick fix, would you say?
Exactly. Like, and that if someone can accept that, they're already a long way down the road to meeting, that version of themselves that they have in their minds. Because one of the biggest things that trips people up is the impatience or underestimating the amount of time it takes. So, even if you are implementing the best mental conditioning system in the world, it still takes time. And there's a very specific way that things change. Like the first thing to change is maybe your reactions. You notice that you're handling a loss a little bit better emotionally. You start to kind of spontaneously hear the affirmations you've been listening to in your mind. And so there's a little bit of a mindset shift. And then you start to see it in your adherence to your trading plan. So like in your metrics of how you executed your plan, they start to change. And it is literally like months to years, depending on where you're at in the journey, before it really impacts the P&L. And so if someone can accept that and stay the course, they're much more likely, to succeed. And it's the best analogy is weight loss. If someone decides to lose weight and they eat healthy for a day and then they weigh themselves the next day and they don't see the scales move and then they give it up and eat all the biscuits, it's the exact same type of thing.
Okay, so there's obviously so many different ways that we could tackle this. And so I wonder if this question is too nuanced, or too broad, I guess. But like if a futures day trader is listening and can make one change starting like tomorrow that would have the biggest impact on the results, is there like a global answer to that? Or is it just kind of more specific to where each trader is at?
I would have an answer, but I would caveat that it's probably the answer comes from how I view this. So you'll have different trading psychologists or different coaches who, have different kind of ways of approaching trading psychology. So this answer is how I see it. It doesn't mean that a different trading psychologist wouldn't give another answer. For me, it's actually tracking everything, because a lot of people try and jump to the fix before knowing what the problem is. And you can't know what the problem is until you actually get objective about it. When I've worked even with athletes, they might come saying, my focus is the issue. And like if it's a soccer player or something, I lose focus on the second half of the match and and actually the issue is confidence, because when you map the data, you can see that, this is going on and this is the pattern. And so you're better able to understand what the issue is. So I would say that the principle is understand the problem and the root of the problem before you try and change anything. And the way you do that practically is to track your data, reflect on, okay, this day that I had a shocker of a day, how did I show up to the market? What was going on? What did I do? What were the actions I took in the market? How about last week? I had a great day. Well, what did I do there? So it just comes back to mapping it in a very systematic way. Then you will have a much better idea of where to start implementing a fix.
Yeah. Okay. I love that, because I think a lot of people downplay the value of journaling in any aspect, and it's avoided a lot of time in traders. But I do think it can help you both perfect your strategy, because you can figure out, like, had I entered based on this candle versus that candle, it would have been a better entry, better risk to reward, etc. But then I think the psychological part of it too, of like you said, when you have a really good day, what do you think was the contributing factors to that? Did you sleep really well and you woke up really calm and you actually were able to have that visualization session before market opened? Versus, maybe a day that didn't end well. Can you also correlate the fact that it was a crazy, chaotic morning, there was a lot of noise in the home, and you didn't focus as well? When you require yourself to write it down, I think it does make it more tangible as something to like put weight on.
Absolutely. Journaling is a funny one, because I totally agree. It's really important to do it. But I think that sometimes if people don't know how to do that or how to do it effectively, it becomes this big, really, task full of labor that people either do for 3 days and then throw it out the window, or it's not specific enough when they're doing it that they don't see the benefit from it. So I think being very intentional about how you journal and what you track is better. So like a 5-minute journaling session that is focused on the exact things that you need to track is going to be 10 times more effective than an hour of just kind of free writing anything that comes into your head. So I think that doing effective journaling is 100% like probably the place to start.
Okay, I love that. And maybe I'm giving away too much of your secret sauce, because people definitely maybe should pursue independent, personalized trading psychology coaching. But if you had to give like the top 5 things that, say, a futures trader should prioritize journaling every day, could you tell us?
Being very intentional about the data you track regarding your trades is, the first really important thing. You could track any amount of data, especially with all of the tech that's out there to track every aspect of everything. But kind of choosing the key things that matter to you in terms of how you execute your trades and what genuinely reflects good performance. That's helpful from the strategy technical side. And then, tracking sleep is key. Like every single trader I work with ever, I get them to track their sleep, because you can actually preempt blowing up, because some days there'll be where someone has had a really bad night's sleep and they actually just based on that, they shouldn't even enter the market. It's like, you're taking on risk before you ever enter a trade. So I would say sleep, not trying to track everything about the strategy, just being specific about that. And then I guess tracking metrics that reflect the execution of your plan rather than the P&L. I think that's something that is so simple, so straightforward, and so many traders don't do it.
You're right. I like it. Traders that even reach out to me that I don't know as well. It's like, the answer to are you tracking sometimes gets like crickets, because then it's like, you don't want to answer if you know that that's something that you're slacking in. But it is a powerhouse of information that you can use to like improve your strategy, everything.
Yeah. And even if someone isn't tracking, that's a tell in itself. So sometimes even like, say, going through my program and there's a very specific way of tracking things and, like, here it is, do this. And people find that they don't do it. And then that's telling something around their like, confidence, or where their subconscious blocks are. They feel ashamed of maybe not being further ahead. They feel the pressure to be like more advanced in trading, because I've been trading for 3 years. I should be consistently profitable. And so there's some element of like shame or some block that's stopping them from actually just facing the reality of where they're at head on. So it's even useful from that perspective. If you try to track and you don't do it, that's information as well.
That's such a good point. That's a gem. Okay, so one thing that I feel like a lot of me and people that I trade with, something that we struggle with is when your first one or two trades loses. And so like you come to the market with the intentions of having a great trading day, identifying your A+ setup, and then only taking that A+ setup. But, there's probabilities in trading. No one is going to win every setup. But if you start with a losing trade or two, the potential for tilt is a lot. You start with a nice win. It's great. You hit your daily profit target. It's so easy to walk away, right? Those are the best days. But when you start with a loss, do you have any tips for preventing the spiral?
Yes. And it's the same. People will frame it as, if it's the first few trades of the day, but actually we would treat it as, if it's any losing trade, the same kind of process to recover. So the first principle is that, every trade should be treated as neutral, as in complete blank slate, and so the skill is actually treating each trade as a blank slate and being able to recover between. And that's also relevant to if you have a big win, because sometimes people are influenced by a big win, they get more confident, they take more risk on the next trade, so it works both ways. So I think the clear skill is to learn to reset to neutral after every single trade and treat every trade as a new completely kind of isolated thing. And that requires shifting from a P&L focus across the board to shifting to process focus. So defining success as P&L profit to success being the execution of your plan. So that's where those metrics come in again. It's an entire mindset shift from like redefining success, basically.
Right. And that'll be another example of when the P&L would be the lagging indicator, because it's not going to happen right away. But if you start to really purposely try to just trade your system to the best of your ability and not worry about the direct financial outcomes right away, then that would be a shift to I want to be my best trader versus I want to have a profitable day.
Yeah. And I think people put too much emphasis on even telling yourself that it's the first few, if the first few trades go bad, I always do this. Like even reinforcing that narrative or that story is reinforcing the problem. So I think actually something that's maybe underemphasized is the importance of the words that you use and the stories that you tell yourself. And that's, I'm sure any therapist would say the same. It's all about what's happening internally. But I think if there is an issue, but then you keep reinforcing it with your inner dialogue, it like builds it into a deeper groove. So it becomes a bigger issue. So sometimes I'll have traders who are saying, should I just not trade for the first 30 minutes of the day so that, I'm less likely to have a losing trade and whatever. And my answer is always like, that completely depends on your strategy. Are your setups appearing in the first 30 minutes? And like, if they are and your strategy says to take them, you should be taking them. It's not like sit out the first 30 minutes to minimize the likelihood of having a first losing trade, because it's the equivalent of sport would be somebody treating, say, a club match different to a championship match or something. So they're like, I have to prepare differently, or I have to like treat the championship preparation, recovery, whatever, differently to the club match one, because they're placing a bigger emphasis on a performance. Whereas the actual ideal is that every single performance, training session, club match, championship match is approached in the exact same way, because then you're actually like you're training yourself to perform and to get mentally ready in the same way across the board. And then that eventually plays out in consistency.
Yeah. Oh, I love that point because I think you're right. Like the way that we talk to ourselves kind of frames like the whole approach and your energy and your heart around it too. If you're just like, gosh, this is always happening and I'm really frustrated. Of course this happened because this happened and blah, blah, blah. Like that can have such a carryover energy that makes it so much harder to be neutral and open to receive like the next great trade and cause hesitation and fear and anxiety versus just like, nobody wins all the time and that didn't work out and it's better for me. Like I know that this is a risk point that I rather just walk away. That way I can be fresh at my next opportunity versus kind of holding on to the fear that could come around it.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that skill of resetting is probably the biggest thing that, if someone can proactively work on that, that's going to be the best way of mitigating any emotional impact of a loss.
And would you say like to help have that reset after a loss or a big win, like physically walking away or just having the habit like turning on music or something or going for a snack? And is that personal? Maybe you just find something that kind of pulls you out of that like headspace?
There's kind of structural things you can do and then there's personal. So I would say first cover the structural bases, where again, going back to those metrics, I talk about them all the time, but the performance goals, so taking the A+ setups, did I stay in the winning trade to the, until my profit target or until my rules told me to get out, all of those kind of things. They're useful because they give you something to anchor on. So I could just say, well, don't focus on the P&L, just focus on the process. And that's completely useless information to you because it doesn't tell you how. So you actually need something for your brain to latch onto that in order to make that shift. So those metrics, if you're holding yourself accountable to that at the end of the day, you're more likely to treat the next trade as a new blank slate because you're like, okay, on that one, I didn't take the A+ setup. On the next one, my goal is to take only A+ setup as opposed to I had a loss. The next trade has to be a winning trade. It gives you a different thing to focus on. But then some personal things like, it could be breathing, it could be stepping away, it could be journaling something really quickly. That piece can also be adapted based on the person.
Okay, I love that. And a lot of what we talked about today was like there is some things that all of us could do better, but I do think that each one of us is a little bit different in what we bring to our trading journey and our backstory and what is kind of holding us back in the moment. And so for that personalized attention, you do one-on-one coaching, right? Just so people can know like that is an option for traders who are repeatedly encountering resistance and they aren't able to like break through to the next level. Maybe this is something that traders could consider, right?
So I do one-to-one coaching, but being very honest, I've developed a mental conditioning protocol, which I've used with athletes, right throughout. Like I've been coaching since 2007, so a long time. So that protocol pretty much for anyone who's not yet a professional trader, like full-on professional working for, a physical prop firm or making their full money from trading, that protocol is in a self-paced format and that's where I would start. So I have people have gone through that protocol and then done one-to-one coaching after if there's very specific things they want to work on. I like that self-paced program. People think that they need one-to-one coaching because their situation is unique. Often it's the case that put the foundation in place, like the mental conditioning foundation in place, and then you'll see what's left over after that. So my one-to-one coaching I only do with professional traders and it's at the much higher end of the scale in terms of investment. Whereas this protocol, you can work through it, put the foundations in place, and that will take you a long way towards, getting that kind of consistency and execution. That's actually where I would recommend that people start.
Okay, so I do have one more question too before we lose you. But for all the traders who are with us still listening, but they're probably here because they're not quite dialed in, right? Still frustrated, inconsistent, and feeling like they're doing everything right, but they're not seeing the results yet. What would you encourage them to remember the next time they sit down at their screen to sort of have the best approach at giving yourself the best chance of success?
I think it's really understanding that there's so much more in your control than it feels like with trading. So, people think that it's down to the market or it's even if it is that you're subconscious or your childhood was traumatic and whatever, there's so many pieces that are in your control. It's just a matter of getting focused and not trying to do everything at once. And usually if someone focuses on one issue with one solution, as long as it's an effective one, they'll start to see progress. And then that progress will build your confidence, your motivation. So I would say understand it's in your control and that there are just doing one small thing and doing it consistently and doing it well will probably help you just take that next step, and then each step will build on the other.
Okay, I love that. That is such a great tip. Like you've had so many words of wisdom today. Like really, I really appreciate your time and helping us like figure out the strategy, both like psychologically and just like long term, I think. Because for me, I feel like the longer you can just try at trading, I think that increases your success, your chances of success exponentially, but consistently, because just showing up and thinking about these questions and these conversations and what you can do each day to become better, I think that builds upon itself. I do think that people who persist can become the consistently profitable ones at the end, but that attention and to these types of conversations and these types of interventions is what causes the difference.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. I really enjoyed our chat. Thank you so much again for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Like, I'm so grateful for your time as well. It's super valuable. So everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, please do subscribe, share it with another trader who needs to hear it. We'll reference links to Créde in the show notes here as well. And so check out more of her content because it's really very powerful. Honestly, like I have been listening to it my entire trading career, and I'm very, very grateful to have you on today. Thank you so much, and safe trading, everyone.